Yeah, I mean, just yesterday I posted something on LinkedIn about, like the fact that founders need to do due diligence on the investor just as much the investor does on the founder. I think sometimes founders feel like they're back to the wall because like they need money and like they whoever will come and write them a check, they'll just take it, not realizing that can also kill your company.
Yeah.
Like you get in bed with the wrong investor and you're screwed. So yeah, absolutely. Like, taking money from the right investor is very important. And yet I think it's awesome that YC has its internal tools to allow founders to just go check like, okay, well, good reviews.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're delighted to have Yotam Rosenbaum on the program. He's had quite the diverse career: musician to startup founder, investor, mentor, former YC founder, invested in over 300 YC companies. So I'm excited to talk to you today. Thanks for coming on the program.
For sure. Happy to be here.
Would love to get an intro from you for the audience.
Well, the short story is born and raised in Israel. After doing the military service, got a scholarship to go study music at Berklee College of Music in Boston.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What was your instrument?
A drummer. And ended up actually majoring in composition at Berklee. And after that, moved to Los Angeles to pursue a career as a musician, which is exactly what I did. Wrote music for TV, films, produced a few bands and albums. Through that experience, realized how nearly impossible it is to market music effectively as an independent band or record label. And that led to the idea of EarBits, an online platform that basically allows bands and record labels to bid for airtime and monetize the audience. Came up with the idea in 2008, talked about it for about 2 years. I had no intention whatsoever to start a startup, knew nothing about startups. I was, again, just a professional musician. But the problem was that the idea just kept on, like, we couldn't get rid of the idea. And the more we talked about it, the more excited we continued to be about it. Finally, in 2010, I started the company, EarBits, applied for YC, got into the Winter 11 batch, raised capital.
Oh, wow, that's
what's
far
that?
Back. What batch was that? That was pretty early, right? Maybe a few years in.
So I mean, the first batch was summer 05, so twice a year, whatever the math is.
Yeah. Wow.
But yeah, we were 42 or 43 companies in the batch, very small. I mean, from our perspective, it felt very big because like it was the biggest batch, but compare it to nowadays, very small and intimate. Paul Graham. Yeah, it was an amazing experience.
Amazing. Wow.
Raised capital, spent the next 4 years building and scaling the company, eventually got acquired in 2015. I stayed on board for another 2 years under the company that acquired us. And then early 2017, my wife and I decided to move to Australia. So I left EarBits and at the same time started investing in YC companies. And yeah, we can talk about that more. But here in Australia, I've been working with founders primarily, both as investor, mentor, running some accelerator programs and such.
That's amazing. What a journey. I bet you never thought you'd end up in Brisbane investing in YC companies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And particularly, the shift from music to tech, just did not anticipate that happening. And it's been amazing. But honestly, like if you told me, like pre-2010 that the next decade is going to look like that.
Yeah. So wild. What a wild journey. So, I mean, how do you think, I've been investing in YC as well for, the last 4 or 5 years, not as much as you, but, how has it changed over the years? I mean, you have quite the inside look over the last, 13, 14 years. How has it changed over? Obviously, the batch size has gotten much bigger.
It's interesting to see the changes as, like YC changes over time, right? Like first it was, very much PG's thing, but then, he moved and then Sam Altman took over and then it turned into something a little different. And then Jeff Ralston and now Gary. So I think with every person who takes over, it changes a bit the flavor and the way that they approach it. I think nowadays with Gary, it very much feels like, YC is going back to its roots. The companies that we see in the batches are very much early stage, young kids trying to build things. I mean, very smart young kids.
Right.
Very often they just started like, just weeks ago.
Yeah.
Versus back, I think in 2020, 21, we would see companies that have been around
$1
for
million of ARR, 2 million of
right.
ARR.
Yeah. Nowadays that it's just not, I haven't seen that happening anymore. So I think it's very much, the focus is very much back to backing true early stage, startups. And by that, it's in most cases just an idea at that point.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well. It feels like each batch has gotten a little, especially as Gary took over, a little earlier, a little less traction.
Yeah.
Maybe a pivot or two in the batch.
Personally, I like that. I think that is the essence of YC.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, like the whole point of YC is betting strong on founders. So yeah, why not? Let's do that, right? Like it's actually, I think, in some way better to do that early on versus like, oh well, great, now they're like 2 years or 3 years into the journey, and let's make the bet now.
Right.
The other thing that is changing is the batch sizes, and also, as you know, like now moving from 2 batches a year to 4. With, I think, part of the reason for that is to decrease the batch size, so the founders can actually have more face time with partners, and it can feel again a bit more intimate, which I think are great things.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to only meeting 100 companies instead of 250 or 400 even,
Yeah.
I just went through that same gauntlet that you probably went through, and August, September, just meeting just so many companies, and they're all amazing. Which kind of leads to the next question, and this has been a challenge for me. Like, how do you pick them? Right? There's 100 companies, 200 companies a batch. Whether it's 2 batches a year, 4 batches a year. You've done over 300 of these, which is so impressive. How do you kind of sort through a batch and decide what looks good to you?
I think.
And you've done a lot of these, so probably more than most people in the world.
Every person I talk to who invests in YC says the same, like basically says that, like, it's so difficult, right? Like, they're all,
it really is.
Clearly, like, they're all good quality because they've made it into YC. So there's something there. But still, like, you want to pick the next Airbnb, you want to pick the next big one. How do you go about doing that? And I think that is exactly the reason why we've taken the approach that we're taking, which is basically, index fund, like indexing Y Combinator, as opposed to cherry picking and trying to pretend like, we have a crystal ball and we can look at these 250 companies and point to here, the 1, 2, 3 that will make it. Personally, I think that's impossible. I mean, maybe you can get lucky.
Oh, I'd hate to try to only pick 2 or 3. That would be a terrible idea,
Right.
Oh.
So what we did is actually we ran some Monte Carlo simulations on data available from previous batches, and realized that even if we were to pick at random a large enough number of companies from each batch, we're likely to outperform most funds.
I love this. I tell my LPs that all the time. That's exactly what Team Ignite does, but we do it, both for YC and for seed companies. And it's a great strategy because you're basically protecting your downside. But let's imagine, because you're not investing in all of them. Statistically, what's that percentage that you guys calculated with the Monte Carlo?
Yeah. So I mean, once you get to about 20%, that's you're gonna do well.
You've sufficiently, even if you're just randomly throwing darts at the Hacker News, you can now, basically get enough winners.
Exactly. Of course, that's not what we do. I mean,
of course,
that actually screens all the companies in the batch, and we are looking for trying to identify the most promising companies in the batch based on certain criteria. I think each one of us looks at this from a slightly different angle. For me personally, I very much pay close attention to the founders, their experience, their background, how well they know each other, because as founders.
That's a key thing I've seen over the years. And I mean, you have way more. How many portfolio companies do you have? It's over 300 YC, and
325.
That's amazing. I mean, so you've probably seen this out of 325 investments over 10 years. You've seen the breakdowns, right? And one of them you called out is this: co-founders thought they were going into this honeymoon, gonna build a company. Turns out they had no work experience, and when shit hits the fan, they didn't
Yeah.
have the foundation to kind of see them through.
Yeah, and I see that in YC. I see it everywhere. Like
Yeah.
that's I think one of the main reasons why startups die. It's because and some of them actually that happens even if they achieve some level of
Right.
success.
Yeah.
But if you're working with someone who you cannot stand, at some point it's probably gonna blow up, and when that happens, it has a very good chance of blowing up the entire operation. So
Yeah,
that's
most of my shutdowns have been that situation. It's
yeah.
one of the founders leaves, now it's a solo founder, and
Yeah. And I
yeah,
think investors tend to. I mean, many investors will talk about, will be aware of that, but I think, and maybe it's because like we talk to these founders while they're still in the honeymoon phase, that it's
yeah,
easy to
yeah,
disregard it. But that's why I think for me it's really important to at least know, okay, did you guys meet like 2 weeks before before YZ started,
yeah. You did founder dating, and
right, or did you meet in high school and you're best friends and like you actually know each other? I
or
know
better
that.
yet, you had like a business together in high school. I've heard that
Yeah,
story
totally.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is
And look,
amazing.
I know that from my own personal experience as a founder. Like, I started EarBits with Joey, who at that point was, first my best friend, roommate for 5 years, bandmate for for 3 years. Like we've known each other very well, and even with that, it wasn't easy,
Yeah,
particularly at the beginning when you start working with someone on like a professional level, different styles, different, so it took some time to like get into the right rhythm. And of course, like there were like, times where we would argue and and storm out of the room. But I think the difference is that we were always able to get back into the room within, a couple of hours, and just it's, water under the bridge, and move on.
yeah, because you have the foundation.
Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. So what else? What else is you're looking at 100, 200 companies, and you're investing in
Yeah.
the
So
top
back to
20% that
the
you see. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, of course, we look at companies that have a huge market opportunity, right? Like the goal here is not to build
This
like
is a tough one. This is a tough one to grasp. The TAM question, right? How do you like really dig into that? And you got your top down. It's a big market. There's 500 billion worldwide spent on this. And then you have your bottoms up, or ACV and this and that. Like how like you've done 325 of these. How are you like looking at TAM? Because they always have that big. And YC does a great job of coaching these founders. So they have the TAM slide. It's there. The market size
yeah.
is big. How do you like
I
kind
mean,
of
again,
read
like
between the
it's
lines
not.
there?
It's far from being scientific. It just needs to. It just needs to be large enough, like to have the potential. Okay, you have to ask yourself, okay, if they are successful, is there a large enough market here for this
Yeah.
company to become $1 billion company?
Which means 100 million in revenue typically, right?
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
kind of the rule of thumb. It's like,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
if it's a 10 billion, if everybody on the planet who needs this bought it, it would be, call it a $10 billion, market. Is that big enough? Like, how do you know, where's that line? Yeah.
Well, I think it's more. You also have to consider the actual accessible market, right? Like, okay,
Mm,
well, it's great that there are billions of people in the
yeah.
world that
That's
need.
the TAM, right? That big 10 or
Right.
50, 100 billion. Yeah.
Right. But most YC companies focus primarily on the US market. So how big the market is in the US, and how likely are they to be able to actually penetrate that market, right? Like have they demonstrated that they actually have, like, were they able to do some of it already?
Right.
Do they have any insights into this market? Like any signs that they'll actually be able to achieve what
Yeah.
it is that they're saying. Now, with that said, all of those things are sort of like, I mean,
Kind of
you can
table
look
stakes
at it as
almost.
much,
Yeah.
you can look at
Yeah.
it as much as you
Yeah.
want, but it almost sometimes doesn't matter because it's so early. Like,
Yeah.
almost guaranteed that like a fair number of these companies are going to pivot a few times before they actually.
This
So
happens all the time.
whatever.
I'll see a YC company. I'm like, not sure, right?
Right.
Stay in touch so I can be useful. And then, a year later, I'll invest from my other fund,
Yeah.
when they're not YC anymore, right?
Yeah.
They're raising their bridge round. And
Right.
by the way, this brings up a big bone I have to pick with YC, which is, why do they call it seed? It's not seed. These are pre-seed companies.
Does it really matter? I
I
mean,
don't know.
say
It's like,
whatever you want. But going back to the pivoting, always think about the most successful company from our batch, from Winter 11, is the Goat Group. I think
What is it?
the Goat, they're valued at $4 billion now.
Oh, wow.
When we went through YC, Eddie and Daishan, the co-founders, name of the business was Grab With Us. It was about like basically, meeting like-minded people over dinner. Right after demo day, I think they raised like 5 mil or whatever, like, went to work, got an office space in Venice Beach, hired a bunch of people. Things were looking great. We lived in Venice as well, so we would sometimes walk to their office, and that's why I saw the evolution. And then I remember like a few months into it, we again like went to their office, and the office is empty. And we're like, what the hell? What happened? They're like, we did the numbers, and like it wouldn't scale the way we wanted it.
Wow.
So we're pivoting. We let everyone go, except like maybe one guy or something like that.
That's amazing.
Then they spent a good 3 years pivoting from one idea to another, just like the most random stuff you can think of. It's not even related to the business that they raised on. And then finally,
but they had like 80 months of runway because they probably still had
exactly.
3 or 4 million in the bank. Yeah.
A bunch of money in the bank, but yeah, they just needed to find an idea that they felt that will work.
Yeah.
And cut to, I think, 2014 or 15 or something like that, like years after YC. They stumble upon this idea of like a marketplace for used sneakers, and that just blew up.
Wow.
And now they're valued at $4 billion. So the moral of the story is that, yeah, you can look at all the things at demo day and try to assess like all those things. A lot of it is going to change. So you have to.
And a lot of it's luck. I think what you're kind of driving home at is, a lot of it's like kind of like if you put yourself out there, and I think you and I think the same way, right? Is, we're going to go invest in like this index basket of startups, and we have a sufficient number that it diversifies away kind of the risk. Mm-hmm. But we're also trying to pick the best one. So it's not like we're just randomly picking.
Sure.
The way I describe it to my LPs is I'm investing in 150 per fund, roughly. That's a sufficient number that even if I'm bad at this, I will hit some sort of index.
Yeah.
But if I'm good at this, it's way beyond the index. But if I'm bad at this, it's still the index. And the index, it turns out, is really, really good. Like, what have you calculated that at for YC? I've heard various statistics around this.
Yeah. So, I mean, our first 2 funds are outperforming 90% of benchmark funds from those vintages.
Top decile performance.
Yeah. So
how many per fund in the first couple funds?
Oh, the first fund was very small, so it was just 19 companies, but the second fund was 50.
Yeah. And then do you just keep escalating it over time because you're now on, what is it, the 5th fund or?
Yeah. Now we'll do the 7th. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so you're raising these every couple of years, basically.
Well, no, we actually raise a fund for each batch.
Oh my God. I'm laughing because fundraising so hard for anybody listening, and doing it every single batch has got to be just like.
Yeah, I was both happy and sad when I saw that YC is shifting to 4 times a week, a year, because basically it means like constant.
You got to go raise it 4 times a year.
Yeah.
Wow. Are you gonna keep raising a different fund for every batch, or do you feel like you might go like one a year now?
I mean, we have to test and see, but we have a pretty efficient process both for raising and deploying. And we've done it 6 times already. We're doing the whole thing from like opening the fund to actually deploying the entire fund. The whole thing usually takes 2 months.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's amazing.
And all the deployment happens before demo day. So by the time we get to demo day, we're done. We're like fully deployed. And
yeah, that's another little secret of the YC investments that I learned the hard way. Yeah, well, I didn't know it 5 years ago when I got started. I was running a syndicate, Team Ignite, and I show up at demo day and I start talking to founders like, yeah, round's done, and I'm like, wait, this is demo day though. Like, oh yeah, we filled it a few weeks ago, and I had to learn that first demo day I went to, like, oh, I should probably start talking to them, before demo day.
Yeah.
What is that? And do you think that's going to change with the 4 batches a year? Do you think Gary's going to try to go, no, don't raise before demo day, or what do you think is going to happen there?
No, wouldn't want to try to get into Gary's head, but I think there's there's value for these companies to start a couple of weeks before demo day. The purpose here is to build momentum going into demo day, and not like it's not like all the rounds are closed by demo days. So a few are.
Yeah.
But I think the majority of them are not. And what happens is that they come into demo day with like, okay, we want to raise 2 million and we already have 1 million committed. So we're just looking for the remaining, which just makes their life easier.
Yeah, it's just you have momentum in the round. It's very powerful when you're fundraising, whether you're a venture capitalist like we are or a founder, to go into something and say, hey, we're oversubscribed. You know, if you want in, like let us know. It's just like it takes all the pressure off.
And to be frank, that is one of the many advantages of going through YC. You're all but guaranteed to raise capital. You know, I mean,
some amount.
Yes.
You may not fill the entire 2 mil. You may only get to a mil or mil and a half, but
it's just an extremely unique opportunity to be in a position where VCs are chasing you and not the other way around.
Yeah, such a great thing. And I tell founders that, like, you have no idea how privileged you are to just have investors lined up at your doorstep.
It's funny because, you know, founders who have only been in the YC ecosystem, sometimes I feel like they live a bit inside a bubble of the YC bubble. Life is not that sweet. Well, it's not like everything's so easy for a YC founder, not at all.
It's still a lot of work.
Things were like the experience. If you're not a YC founder, it's like 100 times harder.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, for us, with EarBits, before we got into YC, we started trying to raise capital and talk to investors. Nobody would even take a call with us. Like, as soon as we got accepted into YC, all of a sudden, everyone started treating us very, very nicely, which was, very nice feeling.
It's the brand, right? It's the same way, you know, people like me got an MBA along the way when I was still climbing the corporate ladder, because it puts this brand stamp on your resume.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, this person's done the hard work, you know, and is worthy and in the top 2% of people, you know, startups or people or whatever.
I think, you know, it's not like an empty stamp that you get. Like, I think there's a true meaning to it. And I think what YC has done really amazingly well is selecting the absolute top startups in the world. Like and again, like you know, because you're looking at the same companies, like the quality is just insane. Like,
it's so hard to pick. It's so hard to pick.
Founders and what they've done, and like, I'm like, holy shit! Like, this is just insane.
Yeah, and I tell my LPs that it's because we have the two strategies. We have a seed strategy and a YC strategy, and I tell them the YC. What's great about having the YC focused strategy is that it informs the seed strategy. So now I've gone and met 150, 200 companies or whatever the number is per batch that are all these amazing teams working on the most cutting edge stuff. And when I go meet a similar team outside of YC, the benchmark, the mark is so high. It just kind of just raises the bar for everything else I invest in.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think something similar happens to me because, you know, I live here in Australia and I also work as a VC here in Australia and run a few programs for founders. And like, I constantly make that comparison. Like,
you go to like another demo day locally, you're probably like, you know, I have this experience all the time when I go to demo days that are second tier, third tier. And I live here east of Sacramento, so not shitting on anybody here in Sacramento, but I'll go to local startup events and I'm like, oof, these founders are so far below what I see at YC or one of the other top accelerators. Sometimes, but
often actually, you know, there are founders who are like, holy shit, like this is totally like YC quality. And it's also interesting to see because they're sometimes removed from that YC world and, you know, Silicon Valley, and like sometimes these founders don't realize that they can play
how good they are
the A league, you know. And that's I think part of the value of that sometimes I bring is actually just like, you know, exposing them to that and encouraging them to apply to YC. And we actually had a few companies that got into YC after working with us here. And
amazing. And that feels good. I've had a couple of those over maybe 2 or 3 over the years now where, you know, we met them before YC, we liked them, we invested out of our other fund, we made some intros, you know, they have a referral mechanism for YC investors, and it's just such a such a feather in your cap when you get one of
Yeah.
your portfolio companies into YC as an investor, because you're like,
Oh,
yeah, I'm good. I'm a good investor.
yeah.
So how are you operationalizing all this? I mean, I have 150 portfolio companies. You have 325. I mean, I know how I keep track of mine, but you're double the scale of Little Team Ignite. Like, how are you keeping track of all this stuff?
Well, first of all, we run the funds on AngelList, which makes it a lot simpler.
Now,
So,
are you
like,
guys the officially sanctioned access fund from AngelList that I see, where they're like, hey, okay, got it, okay,
yeah, yeah. So Benjamin Bryant, my other co-founder at EarBits, and I,
oh
alongside,
yeah, Ben Bryant, yeah, I know Ben,
yeah,
yeah, shout out to Ben.
that together. And Eric Michkowski is also on our team. He was the founder of Pebble and later was
Yeah.
a partner at YC. I think the secret to the success here is keeping things very simple. We are not your typical, like, we're not really like a VC firm. And when we talk to founders, we're very upfront about the fact that we're passive investors. We tell them, here's a check. Very often it's one of the first checks. Go build your company. If you need anything, reach out to us. We'll do whatever we can to help. Otherwise, we're not going to bother you. Like, that's the approach. And then, that combined with the fact that AngelList does most of the, like, tracking, just make, like, keeping up on the valuations and all those
They do
things.
a really good job with their back office. I mean,
Yeah.
I had to divorce myself from AngelList because they would cross market to my LPs, and I told them to stop doing that. So I run off AngelList now.
Yeah.
But I do miss
They
have the best systems in the industry, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we are able to deploy and close like 70, 80 deals within 3 weeks and get money in the bank to those founders within like 24 hours. Like, that's pretty efficient.
Yeah, that's crazy efficiency.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the reason why we've built a really strong reputation within the YC community. We're just very easy to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that matters, right? Because a lot of people don't know this, but they have Bookface. It's like Yelp for VCs, and they're reviewing us as much as we're reviewing them.
Sure.
And I remember
absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's smart, right? Like, how easy is it to work with the Access Fund? How easy is it to work
100%.
with whoever?
And just yesterday, I posted something on LinkedIn about like the fact that founders need to do due diligence on the investor just as much as the investor does on the founder.
Right.
I think sometimes founders feel like they're back to the wall because like they need money and like they whoever will come and write them a check, they'll just take it, not realizing that can also kill your company.
Yeah.
Like you get in bed with the wrong investor and you're screwed. So yeah, absolutely. Like, taking money from the right investor is very important. And yeah, I think it's awesome that YC has its internal tools to allow founders to just go check, like, okay, well, good reviews. Yeah, happy to take it.
And I've been a victim of this because 5 years ago when I was running my syndicate, I would put the YC founders through a gauntlet of stuff. Like, I sent them like a 20-page questionnaire, and I didn't know what I was brand new. Like, I was just coming out of my angel career, and it was the first time like investing other people's money, so I was being super careful. And just going really, really deep. And so I got a couple bad Bookface reviews. There's at least once per batch somebody would be like, "Well, you have bad reviews." I'm like, well, if you look at the reviews, first of all, they're from years ago when I didn't know what I was doing. And second of all, it's about like a really arduous diligence process. It's not me being an asshole or anything.
Right.
So
yeah. I think anyone who is interested in investing in YC companies, either before or demo day or right after, need to understand the rules of the game.
There's some unspoken rules. What are some rules of the game that people don't realize?
I think you need to be willing to move at the speed that those deals move at. And if you're uncomfortable with that, this is just not for you.
Right.
And with that, what it means is exactly what you said. Like, you're not going to have time to, go super deep with every company and like have a bunch of meetings and like get to know them really, really well. Like, you have to basically take whatever information is available and make a pretty quick decision. And it's a yes or no, and that's it. And like, I think the one thing that founders YC or otherwise don't appreciate is investors who just drag their feet and, let's keep in touch. Let's meet again in 1 month. Yeah, that's like, you can do that. That's fine. But like, it's just not going to work out, I think, for YC companies.
Yeah, I love that insight. What else do you think YC founders or founders in general, because you said earlier it's really important to get money from the right investors. What do you think are some things that founders should look out for?
Well, I think a few things. You first need to probably talk to some founders who took money from that investor and get their perspective, because investors, will tell you
get some references. Yeah,
absolutely. Typically, the investor will say, "Yeah, we'll bring a lot more than just capital, and we'll make intros," and like they'll promise the word, but only few actually follow through with and actually do that.
It seems to be inversely correlated to check size, is what I hear from my founders. Like
I don't know.
The larger the check, to a degree, because it's we're writing little checks, 25K, 50K,
yeah.
And I hear from founders like it's some of the more valuable money on the cap table because of Team Ignite, right? Because of this big network that we come with. And I do follow through on my intro, promise and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But some other big check writers, they just kind of write their big check and kind of, they get a call from the golf course every once in a while, I guess, or something. But
exactly. Well, the best thing to do is not listen to all the promises, but actually go to a founder that have worked with them and ask, okay, well, like, what kind of value are you getting from that investor? I think that is the most important thing to do. The other thing to do is to just be upfront, on like just setting up expectations, both ways. Like, what do you as an investor expect from me as a founder? And here are the things that I would expect from you as an investor. Like, if I call, like, whatever it is, like if I'm the type of founder who wants a 24/7 access to the investor, say that, ask the question, would you pick up the phone if I call you, Sunday 9 p.m. Have those conversations.
At least text me first and let me know you're calling, though.
Yes,
because if I just get a random phone number, I'm probably not picking it up.
And I can tell you, like, we've for EarBits, we had 39 investors. Some of them were incredibly helpful, and some of them were absolutely not.
How do you characterize that? Were they the not helpful ones just not responding? They just weren't. You'd ask for help and they would just like not help.
Yes, I think there are three different types. So the extremely helpful ones, the ones that like whatever time of the day, Michael, we have a problem. Like, what do we do? Yeah, we'll always pick up.
Yeah.
The other type of like, we'll respond to the updates, and every once in a while we'll do something helpful. And the third type just completely disappear.
Just completely disappear. Yeah, they're on the cap table.
Maybe for them the investment was just like, hey, this is a little bet I'm making on this YC company. Here's the money. Leave me alone. That's fine. I guess the important thing here is not to expect that every investor would be extremely helpful and will pick up the phone at every time of the day, but sort of like just getting to know that before you actually take the money. So what kind of investor are you? Do you want to be passive? Do you want to be active? Are you going to respond to my emails?
I think some are probably in the middle. I don't think I'm the first phone call that founders make because I'm such a small check, but I'm always responsive.
Yeah. Same here. Like, again, despite the fact that we define ourselves as passive, we are extremely active when founders ask us for something. Yeah.
So let's talk about deal structure for a little bit. I think a couple of years ago, everyone knows that, or most people know that, YC started doing the 375K at the MFN. Mm-hmm. How did that change how you approached it? Because at that point, you've already invested in hundreds. You remember when that happened? Like, what was your reaction? What were you thinking? And like, how did it change your approach, if at all?
It did not change the approach at all. But doesn't really matter.
And do you typically, what's your typical check size? And do you guys typically go for the uncapped MFN? Or do you guys just say, oh, okay, it's a 20 cap, we'll just do the 20 cap?
Yeah, so we write 50K check across the board, and we take whatever valuation basically the founders are asking for. Usually, the way that they run that by the YC partners, and we trust the partners to, valuations change. Like you've seen 2021, they were insane. Now they're a bit more reasonable. At the end of the day, it doesn't make a huge difference when you invest in such large number of companies. Our objective is to have at least a couple of winners in each batch. And if a company goes from 15 million or 30 million at the seed to a few years later 2 billion, the difference is not going to be that meaningful.
Yeah, because again, we're not trying to invest in 15 cap companies and hoping they'll get to 30 cap. We're investing in 15 cap companies and hoping they'll end up to be billions of dollar companies. So
exactly.
Yeah, the entry price, this is something that people can't get their head around, is like, it doesn't really matter that much if it's 10 or 15 or 25, because we're not investing to 2x the money. We're investing to 100x the money.
That's exactly right.
What's your stance on ownership targets? I'm sure you have a pretty nuanced opinion on that.
Not really. I mean, again, like maybe it's because our approach is just so different. It's more about the diversification and making sure that we have enough exposure. We historically haven't done follow-on investments, but it's something that we are definitely looking into. Well, we actually started doing that recently, and we get a lot of interest from LPs a lot of appetite, and we see.
Yeah, they're like, hey, we saw that company just got a big Series A or B, and we want to invest. Can you get us an allocation? Yeah.
Right. But the main play here is just, hey, let's try to basically invest as many companies from each batch as possible. Let's try to select the most promising ones, and then just sit and wait.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good strategy, and it's one that when I got started in this space, I kind of did the same thing. I ran the Monte Carlos. I looked at the portfolio construction. I was like, what's the optimal model to invest in this space?
Yeah.
Assuming I'm bad at picking, which is a weird thing to say. I think I'm good at picking, but let's assume I'm bad at picking. And what's the optimal strategy?
I think that strategy can work really well as long as the pool that you're choosing from is really high quality, right? Yeah. So I think the unfair advantage that we have here is, the early access to YC companies. That again, like even just picking at random, you're gonna do just fine, because someone has already done the filtering and the whatever number of companies in the batch are, they're already have been vetted pretty thoroughly. Yeah.
And then are you asking for any side letters, or you're just taking the straight capped safe?
Yeah, just straight.
They don't like side letters unless it's 250K typically.
Again, like it's all, like we keep it simple.
Yeah. Which means you get good book face reviews and you keep your early access to these companies.
And then when they get to do their Series A, they're happy to let us participate if you want.
That's amazing. Well, why don't we switch to, I could sit here and talk about YC for another hour with you, but why don't we switch to a rapid fire to sort of wrap things up? What's your favorite memory from your time as a professional musician?
I think so. After I graduated from Berklee, I decided to produce my own jazz album. I've been composing a bunch of tunes and figured. To be frank, I knew that it's like from the market perspective, it's not gonna necessarily be a product that I'll be able to sell and make money off, because the market for jazz music is pretty small. But I just felt like it was something that I owe to myself, like to do. So I've kind of like did it as a project for myself, and I was lucky enough to be able to put together a band of like just insane musicians, 2 of them Grammy winners, and just took 2 days recording in Boston and doing that whole process, being in the studio, and then everything that came after that, putting together the album from A to Z, was a really amazing and very rewarding experience, which also ended up actually helping me in many different ways that I didn't actually anticipate. But I think that is, there are many memories, but that would be one of them.
That's amazing. Are you still playing?
I have my drum set right here next to me. Sometimes I sit and make some noise.
Like how often would you say you play?
Rarely, like a couple times a week. But it's really just making noise.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I went through this period of my 20s. I never got as deep into music as you, but I got pretty deep into guitar in my like 20s. Didn't pick it up till I was like 25, 24 years old, and got to this point where I could almost play anything I wanted, and I was writing songs, and I realized I didn't really enjoy the process of songwriting, and I just kind of music got stale after a while, and I just sort of put my guitar down. Like I just don't. I only play it like you, like once a week, maybe maybe just a few times a month, and it just sort of got stale.
Yeah, it happens.
Kind of sad in a way, and I've been sort of like trying to reignite that fire in me to play, and it's that's what's great about having kids. That I watch my son just really get into it. He's in jazz band. He plays tenor sax, and he plays piano beautifully, and so I kind of get to live vicariously. 14, ninth grade.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot of fun. So which startup you invested in surprised you the most in its growth?
That's a tough question. I don't know.
325. It's like, I have the same problem when somebody's like, well, tell me about a company in your portfolio that's exciting. I'm like,
I know. And
I don't know. There's so many. Like, where do I start?
I honestly feel like singling out any one of them will no, skip.
You know what one that recently from YC that I've had the most inbound requests to talk to is Bland AI.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys invested in Bland as well. We invested a couple batches ago, and I've got more inbound requests to talk to Bland than any other company in my portfolio ever.
And why do you think that is?
I think they're just really good at marketing. I mean, obviously they're building something cool. It's AI and everything, but they've also put up some really awesome billboards in SF, and they've just been kind of out there on the marketing front.
Right. Yeah.
Just created a lot of buzz.
Yeah. It's not necessarily always the company that will actually win. The one like the hot rounds of demo day are not an indication of like who is actually a winner.
That insight.
I think investors very flock into companies that have like high IRR at that point, or that there's something that gets that traction going. But we are not terribly devastated if we missed one of those.
Yeah,
because
tell me about that. Like I've kind of learned that too over the years. Like to be okay with missing hot deals.
Yeah.
What is that insight? I think that's something that's a mature outlook that occurs after a while.
Well, I think if you look back and you're like, well, let's examine all these like hot deals from previous batches. Where are they now? And then you realize, well, actually, it wasn't the hot deal that became the the star of the batch. You realize that again, it's not like everyone is looking for like indications for like, okay, who is the winning team? They're just not like, those are not like clear indications. Like the fact that a lot of investors excited at that point doesn't mean that they're going to win at all.
And a lot of investors are followers like that. Like they do kind of crowd in to the hottest ones.
Yes.
And
yes, that's part of the reason. I very often other investors will like ask to compare notes and whatnot. I'm happy to share my notes, but I'm actually not interested in seeing other people. I know that it's going to affect me. It's going to affect me that I look at it, and I don't want that.
I don't want to read anyone else's deal memo,
and unless someone has like an actual like real intel, meaningful like piece of data about the company. I want that. I don't want their opinion, because their opinion are just as good as mine.
And we'll see whose opinion like works out in the end, right?
Yeah, but the reality is that if you start listening to other opinions, they're going to change the way that you judge whatever it is that you're looking at.
What are some of the other things I don't think we exhausted that list of, team and history together, and obviously market size. What are some of those other key indicators that you look for?
I mean, what are they building? Is there something novel about the technology itself, or about the way that they are looking at the problem that they're trying to solve? I mean, let's be honest here. Like, most of these startups many of them are trying to solve the same problem, right? Or similar, like you've seen it before, like, 100 times. What is unique about this team? Do they know something about the market, or looking at the market from a different perspective that is very unique to their experience? Yeah, so there needs to be something there, right?
Yeah, I love that.
How they approach it or how they look at it. Timing.
And investors, that's the benefit of being a high volume investor like we are, both of us, because you get so many at bats, you kind of start, seeing the differences between companies because a lot of it is the same, like you said.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I've seen this problem before. You're going to tackle RFIs in the kind of blah blah space or whatever, and okay, but what's different? Are you approaching it with a different business model, a different technology, a different insight?
Exactly. Yeah, like what's unique about the way that you go about it?
Right.
Sometimes it will be just like, hey, we'd like have a completely different go-to-market approach that we've demonstrated that works really well.
Yeah, we have 140,000 TikTok followers, or there's some distribution wedge or something, something unique. Oh, we have 1 million people on YouTube following us, and
I think the other benefit too. So eventually, like we screen all the companies, we sort of like highlight the ones that we feel are the strongest, but then we also need to look at it from like a portfolio composition perspective, making sure that it's diversified. So we'll always like have a little bit of everything, so some SaaS, some hardware, some biotech, and that also allows us to take a few bets on things that are totally out there.
Yeah, some space tech stuff. Yeah.
Like, moonshots, basically. Yeah. If you're only making 3 or 5 investments, you feel like, oh my God, like I have to like stay
safe a little bit. Yeah, stay in my lane. Yeah.
When you make 80 investments, you have the obligation to also make a few bets of like, okay, this is totally nuts. It's crazy, but if there's
but if it works,
exactly. Which is a lot of fun because that means that you can place bets on things that are a bit out there.
Yeah, I did one of those Thunder Compute in the last batch. That was one of my moonshots. I was like, it's a little early. I don't know if it's going to work, but if it works, it'll be big. It's one of those things. If you could give one piece of advice to a first-time founder, what would it be?
I think my advice would be to just go and do stuff. Like, it's easy to get bogged down with like trying to think and try to figure out how things will work out and like try to engineer your way to success. The reality is that no matter like how much thinking you do, at the end of the day, like the real learning happens when you actually go and do things. So yeah, if you have an idea and you think about maybe doing something about it, go and actually start doing something about it. If you have a product and you think about doing something with it, go and try to sell that product, get someone to actually pay you, and the sooner the better, because again, like the real lesson come when you actually do at least that's how I feel. And the same was for me in music. I went to Berklee College music. I studied music. I studied composition. I did that for nearly 4 years, but the real learning actually came when I moved to LA and I got a gig composing for a TV show where I had to deliver music week by week to air on TV. And all of a sudden, I'm like, holy shit, pressure. I need to learn a lot of things very quickly.
I love that. Yeah. Get out of the building, do shit, as Steve Blank would say. This is kind of a cliche question, perhaps, but like, what's one technology, maybe it's AI, maybe it's something else, that you believe will drastically change the world in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think the answer is pretty obvious at this point.
Yeah. And it's so funny how much that changed in the last few years, because we went through this, I worked in AI for the last 15 years, and it kind of went through this like little lull right before ChatGPT, where it just kind of wasn't cool anymore, and it was crypto and blockchain, Web3.
AI is not a new thing. I mean, it's been around for decades, right? Which I think is a really interesting thing. I think people often fail to realize that new technology very often, like, it actually takes years and sometimes decades for it to actually get into mainstream. I think potentially that may happen with crypto, where people, some people are like, oh, well, look, like, it didn't happen. It didn't.
No, it's going to happen. It's just going to happen in a way you didn't expect, and it might take longer than you expect.
Another 10 or 20 years or whatever it is. But like, if there's enough benefit from the technology that can be achieved, at some point it will happen. So yeah, AI has been around forever, but it took a long time for it to actually get into mainstream, and now it's here. Both exciting and terrifying.
Yeah, pretty crazy stuff. What's your go-to strategy for staying productive?
I think my go-to strategy is to be attuned to how I feel and not to try to force it. I think I'm most productive when I do things at the right time. So if I feel, for example, that I'm not motivated to do something, yes, I can sit down and force myself to do that thing.
Yeah.
But I'm probably better off actually doing something else, get myself into into the point where I feel motivated, and then do that thing that maybe was challenging an hour ago. I think for me, just having certain routines, also prioritizing, the basics, which is sleep and food and rest, then I'm just able to be a lot more productive when I actually do things. And then when I do whatever I need to do, try to stay focused.
Yeah.
So, just focus on one task. I completely don't believe in multitasking.
No, me neither.
So yeah, that's
It's a good way to do like half-ass two different things at the same
absolutely.
time. I mean, some people's brains are wired like that, I think, and they can do it. I can't. I got to focus on one thing. But
And actually, I think that actually it's counterproductive, but I'm a lot more productive when I try to do less. So instead of like, putting a bunch of things on my plate and feeling overwhelmed and like, and then you get to the point where like you can't actually function on any of those things. If you just remove like, 80% of the things from your plate that anyways you're not going to have time to do, and then just focus on the, the 20% that is most important, just going to knock it off plate very quickly and then move on to the next item.
Are you one of those guys who schedules things like, okay, I'm going to do deal review from 9 to 10 a.m. kind of thing, or?
Yes and no. So I do that, I think, like sort of like in my head, but not, I don't have to do that, like actually like go into my calendar and do that unless it's a really, 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 really super busy period where I really need to then like do that. Otherwise, it's more like a mental thing for me where I would be like, okay, in the next 2 weeks, it's going to be really busy on that front. So I need to prioritize that. And some, maybe I should put it on paper because maybe that's like having that in my head maybe causes some stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've learned to kind of go, what's been hard for me is, retiring for the day is what I call it.
Yeah.
Where I kind of get to this point in the day where I'm like, I don't think I'm productive anymore. And I'm just going to put it down.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm just, and it might be 4 o'clock in the afternoon, it might be 6 o'clock in the evening. At some point, there's just some point where I'm like, I don't think I'm productive anymore.
Right.
And my energy is waning and I need to put it all away.
100%. I think it requires some courage in our society and our environment, particularly, startup. But absolutely, like there's a point of the day where you're just not being productive, and sitting in front of the computer and pretending like you are is not helping anyone at all.
Yeah, there's a stat I think where at the 8th hour of work you're only 50% productive, something like that, 54%.
Personally, for me, I think I have about 6 hours of good work per day, like in terms of like high quality. Sure, I can go beyond that, and I very often do, but it's not the same quality. And then it also just depends. I think also the other thing, just taking breaks. Like I really enjoy sometimes, doing some work, then doing something completely different, maybe working in the garden for some time, and then coming back feeling energized again to do another block of good work.
Yeah.
But for me, one of the reasons why I think I would never really be able to work a regular job is because the whole concept of like going to office and sitting on a desk for 8 hours, I just don't know how people do that.
I can't believe I used to do it. I think you and I are very privileged to do what we do because you have absolute flexibility. You want to take a day off, just move all the meetings and just take the day off, and you don't have to ask anybody. You're your own boss. And
I think what really matters is the outcome. Like, are you achieving the things that you want to achieve, and during like in the period that you want to achieve? That's all. And if it takes you an hour, that's great. If it takes you more, that's fine too.
Yeah. That's amazing. What's a book that's influenced your approach to business and life the most? Business and or life?
There are many. I think one influential book that I read as we were doing YC was the Lean Startup.
Air Grease.
Yes, kind of like, again, like for me at that point, I knew nothing about startups. It was a really good way to to think about things, very much aligned with, the whole YC philosophy. And yeah, just really helpful in terms of like realizing that, whatever you think, your opinions, you need to put them aside for a minute, or you need to retire them.
Yeah.
And default to what the customers think and what the market says. Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed the conversation. We have so much in common, similar investment styles, philosophies. I know if I wasn't also investing in YC companies, I would invest in your fund. So thanks for doing what you do. And thanks for spending all this time with us. I learned a lot from the conversation. Where can folks find you online?
Mostly LinkedIn. Yeah. Yeah.
Great. Well,
yeah.
thanks so
Brian.
much.
It was a lot of fun. Really enjoyed
Yeah,
the
I enjoyed
conversation.
it. Thank you.
Awesome.